We don't chase trends. We on the wave. Lagos to the world. We build. We brave. We build. We brave. We build. We brave.
Continent.
Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So, where am I
Thank you.
reaching you from?
From Lagos, Nigeria.
Okay. And how is the weather situation today in Lagos?
It's been raining since like 3 a.m. this morning. It's still raining up till now. So everywhere is pretty damp and very cold. Yeah.
Oh, I see. And how is the hold up? Did you have to go to the office today?
No, so today is a public holiday. So most of us are working remotely from wherever we are. A couple of my team are in the office, but the rest of us are basically working from their homes.
Oh, okay. So you are safe today from the Lagos grid. I want to start with this question. Most people see solar as an energy conversation. You speak about connectivity and housing in the same sentence. What are most people not still understanding?
So basically, what most people don't really understand is it's not only energy. Energy is an infrastructure, right? And how we at Moon Innovation sort of like built out our own conversation ideas, our product was basically energy as the foundation, internet as its connecting layer, and AI and every other services as a value-added service, basically. That's how we worked around it. And this wasn't just outside of just going out there and bringing in the product from China or from America. We had to sit down and basically understand how people think, how people work, how people interact with infrastructure around Nigeria. We talked to over 1,000 people, and we found out that it's not just energy alone. It is an infrastructural issue. And how do you solve an infrastructural issue? You'd have to go to first principle to build the infrastructure from the ground up. Electricity, internet, security. What comes next? EV charging, cold storage. Artificial intelligence now becomes very plausible at that point in time for healthcare, for retail. But a whole lot of us don't really understand that without electricity, AI doesn't really work, right? Internet doesn't work. Security doesn't work because there has to be that foundation, which is energy at this point, to be there.
Okay, you touched a lot of different points. Hopefully, we can have enough time to go through all of them. But let me start with the basics from which you talked about infrastructure. And I know from my personal experience that infrastructure is a very big problem in Nigeria and in Africa as a whole. You are the founder of Moon Innovations. So what do you really do? Because when people talk solar, it could be very broad. It could be you are selling panels. It could be you are selling energy.
Yeah.
What do you really do at Moon Innovations?
So what we do at Moon Innovation is pretty straightforward. We are focused on infrastructure. Infrastructure meaning energy, internet, security, and AI services. And we sort of like built out a particular product to fit this case, the solar utility box, which was previously called the Solar Smart Inverter System. Now, the solar utility box is an all-in-one solution that provides solar electricity, wireless internet connectivity, and AI security surveillance, which can be deployed in homes, businesses, and communities, either in the urban area or in the remote communities, so that you as a business, as a home, as a community could have that basic infrastructure to excel in whatever business you're doing. If you're a remote worker, you could work from anywhere, because you have that basic infrastructure there. It is very, very key for the youth today to have the basic infrastructure. And that's what a whole lot of people are lacking in Nigeria and the rest of Africa.
How can your target customers? Because solar is still quite expensive. When you look at a country like Nigeria, where the minimum wage is 70,000 naira, approximately that is like $30, $40 in a month. That is basically nothing. So who are your clients and how do you make this solution affordable?
Okay, so that's a question we always get from both our clients, sponsors, and all of that. Our clients are diverse. The energy runs across the board, from the urban regions to the peri-urban and the rural and the remote regions. So we tend to design our solution with regards to the customer. Now, let's take for the urban region, real estate. We could go into real estate, deploy our systems to them, and they pay upfront. We could talk about the rural communities. Currently, we have a 4,000 people community, and they don't have electricity whatsoever. no electricity, no internet connectivity, no mobile access. So what do we do in that case? We provide this solution as an energy service, energy internet, community-based internet access, cold storage services at much more subsidized rate. So they get to pay for this system as a pay-as-you-go. Good enough, the Nigerian government sort of like decentralized energy. So anyone can actually build any energy infrastructure, whether it's a nano grid, a microgrid, a mini grid, you're allowed to do it. So we took up this opportunity to see how we could deploy it across the board. Either you are a community or a business or a single household that just want this infrastructure to serve you properly. And funny enough, we also have financiers. There is several financiers in Nigeria that have focused on energy financing. So we have customers that come to us, tell us, "Oh, I don't have all of the money to pay for this system." Right? We talk to our energy financiers. They go through a process where the customer either pays 30% upfront or none at all, and pay for these products over a period of time, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years. For the communities, it's basically around a power purchasing agreement where over the next 15 years, we provide this service to them and they pay via prepaid, pay as you go, not a whole lot to their
Let's break it down to more specific. Let's take the private individual where you provide solar infrastructure or solar energy. You talked about 30%. Let the number very concrete because our audience, many of them are investors and diasporas as well. So they want to understand what is the specific. Let's just take a household for 5 to 7 people, or let's just make it even more normal, 3 to 5 people. So how much are we looking at for, let's say, for 1 year? What will it take to bring in solar?
For a single household of
Exactly.
4 to 5 people,
Yes.
you're talking of, you're talking of an average of like 5 million naira. 5 million naira is, in conversion terms, we are talking roughly around $2,500, give or take, right? So all the person needs to pay
Okay.
is 30% of that amount. Then the rest will be broken over
Okay.
a period of time, which is 2 years. Yeah, that's it basically. Now, there are several situations where, and we have tested all of them, right? We've tested all of them with regards to the underserved communities where they don't have this amount. It becomes very difficult. So we could say they don't consume as much power as a standard household. All they need is maybe light bulbs, internet to connect and browse their phones and all of that. With a situation like that, we now install in clusters. So those clusters basically helps us and helps them as well to pay for the services at a subscription level, much more lower, up to like $30 in a month, or even lower than $30 in a month. Some of them in the market we're doing around $3
$3 in a month.
in a month.
Okay.
Yeah, $3 in a month. Yeah. But with that, it's the time period for payback is much more longer. You're talking around 5 years, 10 years, because you have to get your ROI on your investment first, then also the profit as well. But they love it because it helps them a whole lot to solve a major part on their issues.
That makes a lot of
That's
sense.
it, yeah.
And going back to what you said, I understand the economics behind it, but we have to also be very realistic that 5 million, that is middle class, above middle class in Nigeria. Because like we said, 70,000 minimum wage. And then before you can be able to afford 5 million, you're looking at cars, you're looking at school fees, you're looking at feeding and stuff like that. So it's still at the upper grade. So let's say in the society, middle class and above middle class, which is not a problem because like a solution is always the way out. So it starts from somewhere and then you have to see how, as time progresses, how you can make it cheaper. But to the other question, you said something regarding rural community where you do 15 years contract and then they pay over a period of time. So in that kind of situation, how do you fix the tariff? Is it you or do you align to the current situation? I know in Nigeria right now, if I'm wrong, please do correct. I think you pay from the national grid, you pay 210 naira for kilowatt hour. That will be the current rate for electricity in Nigeria. So in your case, for these kind of rural communities, how do you fix the rate? Because 15 years is a very long time. And as a company, you need to survive. You have a lot of, like you said, when you buy this equipment, they're not produced in Nigeria. You import them from China, wherever. And when you import this kind of equipment, you don't ask them for that long period of time to pay back. If you even have a credit, you are lucky, but most times you pay full. So looking at this 15 years time is a very long time. No doubt about it. But what I'm trying to understand, or probably for my audience, how do you fix the tariff that these people will pay over this period of time? Do you align your price along the national tariff, or do you fix it based on the cost you incur through the process of providing power to this community?
Fixing it with the national tariff, it's a little more difficult than that. So we sort of like fix it with based on the system itself. You need to understand this. People are willing to pay. They're already paying for infrastructure that is not currently working. Right? For the fact they are not paying for it, they are looking for something very, very reliable as it is. So the only thing you just need to do is to prove that whatever system you are bringing is reliable, is sustainable, is something that will be there when they sleep, when they wake up. Once you are able to show that, they will be willing to pay for it. And it is not something we've thought about, it's something we've experimented and seen and they've paid for.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Do you believe Africa's future infrastructure will be decentralized by necessity rather than by choice?
It will be decentralized by necessity. It's already heading there, as we already said. So we feel that even in Nigeria, energy right now is currently being decentralized as much as possible. In other countries, we're also seeing the same effect. The only places you see centralized energy is within major cities. Outside of major cities, most energy infrastructures are all decentralized. And that's the only way you could speed up infrastructural development across the board.
So in that case, at what point does distributed energy stop being a complement to a national grid infrastructure and start making it politically impossible to build? At what point do you think that will happen?
Okay, that's a tough question. I'm not sure that we'll get to that point. Why, basically, as it is, distributed energy right now is already integrated into various grid connections. You could check in Poland with the problem from the Strait of Hormuz has shown a whole lot of need for why distributed infrastructure should be made available. It needs to be more like a connection with the government itself. So distributed infrastructure is already backed by the government. It's something we've thought about since 2010, or rather I thought about since 2010. And thinking about, we foresaw that there would be a time where solar would be one of the mainstream energies across Nigeria. And why so? Africa has an abundance of sun, more than every other continent across the world. It would be so wrong not to use that natural resources in bettering the life of the African people.
It's because infrastructure challenge actually a leadership and execution problem more than a technology problem.
That should be across the board. It is both leadership, execution, technology, because when you look at it like this, technology is already there. But what we need is implementation, government implementation, people implementation. That's where the problem is. There was a conversation I saw somewhere where we found out that if you check most of the Nigerian language, there's no word for maintenance. Yes, there's not a single word for maintenance. And maintenance basic form comes from the leadership side. They have to help maintain resources, maintain supply chain, maintain business structures, maintain interest for operators like us to develop, deploy this solution across the Nigerian space or the African space. So it is more of a leadership problem than technology, but it combines both of them. Yeah.
This is very important because I was looking at the value. China, for instance, produced 315 gigawatt last year from solar. Africa in total produced 4.5 gigawatt. And that says a lot about the current situation. And like you mentioned, technology is just like a side effect. Because at the end of the day, if you have leadership that understand this scope, that understand the strength and actually the advantage Africa has with the sun, then they should actually put frameworks in place to make this possible. Financing framework, just name it. Because, like you said, only very few cities right now have centralized energy or can still afford it. So everyone is trying to go decentralized. And I think because of the way Africa has been built so far and what has happened, it is quite just difficult to get centralized energy. It has to be decentralized. Anybody who is still believing that it will be centralized is just not, based on my perspective, is just not getting the full picture. But what I'm trying to get at with this statement is, if China could produce 315 gigawatt of electricity in 2025 and Africa as a whole produce 4.5, what needs to happen in Africa for this kind of transformation? Of course, China is a superpower, but what needs to happen for Africa to change the current dynamic?
For Africa to change the current dynamic, it still falls on what we said, leadership. How is to implement, operate. Leadership basically facilitates all of that, all of the problems we're currently facing. But understand there's a huge opportunity for operators like us to actually build solutions in Nigeria and across Africa. For that, I would say our leaders need to sit down and propose proper projects, not the announcements they normally make, but proper projects which basically affects the people. Allowing operators like us to deploy solutions across the board, providing financing, providing guidance, providing partnership, public-private partnership, either as a startup or as a large business.
My observation from Africa is most times the conversation, especially about innovation, still feel disconnected from real industrial scale execution. Is this an academic problem, a structural problem?
It's both academic and structural, but more unstructural than academics. We didn't move with technology as per se. And why was that? Because once you move with technology, your academic schemas basically change to meet the current needs of the people. I always tell a couple of people, if we had known, we would have been studying mathematics in Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa. It would take academics much more closer to the people, just like edge computing. With that, people will get to understand what to do and how to go about it. It's much more difficult for someone studying English in the village to translate whatever he's doing. He has to, first of all, translate it his own language first before he understands it. So if we have to solve the problem, it's on a structural scale. We have to go back to the basics. The training has to change. Technical skills has to be integrated in schools properly. We are lacking a whole lot of that. Let me say, for instance, most of the engineers we have and the technicians we had to get them from school for years, ONDs, and we had to train them from scratch. It was difficult. It's still difficult because those of them that are highly skilled are well sorted out outside of Africa. And the opportunity is there and they just go. It's much more easier for them. But for us down here that are actually trying to see how we can solve this problem, we have to go to the basic. I had an intern come the other day and he was into physics. I told him if he has seen a resistor before. He's a fourth year student. He said he hasn't seen a resistor before. He doesn't know how the resistor looks like. And this is someone who is supposed to graduate next year. What do we do? You can't just stop there. You have to find a way to make him understand. Before he left his internship, he learned how to assemble an entire inverter by himself. Because we created a structure for him to make it possible for him to understand what he's actually doing. He assembled the inverter himself, coupling batteries, and he was so happy when leaving and defending his project because for him, it was the first time he had ever expressed something like that. I did too. I expressed the first time building an inverter, something with my hands in my forte year. And that should stop. We have to find a way to start from the base.
So, in terms of running the business in Nigeria, especially business like yours, it's highly technical. Nigeria, unfortunately, does not produce the kind of candidates that can easily take over this position. You will have to retrain as a business. How expensive and how difficult is it for you as a business to survive if you have to train everyone from crash?
It's expensive because it's time consuming, and time is money, basically. But it's something we still have to do. Because we understand most of all these new entrants have the capabilities. They just want to be provided with the opportunity to do what they need to do. And they learn pretty fast. That is the most interesting thing. They learn very, very fast. Most of them we've worked with has either moved on to working in the US, working in Europe, moving to other bigger companies outside of Moon Innovations. And it's interesting to see. And for that, I would say it has to be something very intentional as a business. And we've taken it intentional. We've made it intentional in such a way whereby anyone that comes in, we have to train them. We have to train them to basically understand the culture, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. Whatever we're building, you have to have their skills.
How do you remain competitive?
How we remain competitive is the value on our products. So if you understand, we basically talked about not providing just energy alone, but also other services as well. People come and go, workers come and go, and this is for us. It is normal.
But as a company, long term, what strategy do you think you need to put in place to ensure that at least this talent you train, you have the opportunity to profit back from them
For
before they
that,
move on?
we are adopting several approaches around equity sharing, pooling of interest to keep them on a longer term with us. Also, with regards to payment structures, we will have to try as much as possible to match whichever payment is coming from wherever they are moving towards. Those are the two ways we feel we can work around this. For the equity, it's much more stronger because they now have a vested interest in the business. They see the business as theirs. So once the business grows, they grow as well. The financial interest in the business also goes as well.
And I think the government can also play a role in that. But I think that is quite a longer conversation because it is easy to tell people to stay if you're not performing as a government. And I think overseas, looking at the current situation, it is not always about the financial aspect, but you can't stop people from doing what they want to do. You just have to do everything possible, legally possible within your means to ensure that at least you retain the talent you have. Now, looking at that, do you think Africa risks becoming only a consumer of AI instead of an owner of
Yes,
AI
for that,
infrastructure?
I feel that's a possibility. I know. Why do I say that? We could use chatbots, we could use mobile apps, we could use chat GPT and whatnot. But we need to own the infrastructure. Without owning the infrastructure around artificial intelligence, it becomes a possibility for us to just be a consumer. How do I mean about infrastructure? I mean about infrastructure with regards to energy. Artificial intelligence needs energy. It needs connectivity. It needs data. It needs sensors. The entire value chain around it. And without we owning this infrastructure, this value chain
How
of
high is the
value chain,
probability?
we end up being just consumers, basically. The probability is 90%. It's high, but there's a possibility for us to change that. There's a huge possibility for us to change that when we focus on the foundational elements. We just can't jump from one industrial revolution to the fourth industrial revolution. You have to go through a process. That's why we have to focus on the foundational level. Electricity, connectivity, energy, connectivity, data, creating sensors, the foundational elements to create artificial intelligence applications in-house in Africa to fit our own use case. Because we tend to lose this artificial intelligence being governed by a different country. data center deployed in a different context, it becomes a problem. You can't actually hold it because it's not here. It's not within the African space. They could choose to hold it off for you, and it doesn't get to you if they choose to. But when you hold the infrastructure itself, you hold the energy infrastructure, you hold the data center, you hold the edge computing, like what we are doing with the solar utility box.
There is a lot when we talk about energy infrastructure and infrastructure in general in Africa and in Nigeria. What is the hardest reality you discovered after moving from vision into execution?
The vision was a dream. vision, vision was a dream. Infrastructure was messy. Infrastructure is messy because you don't just walk around an idea anymore. You are faced with real ground realities. You have to walk around operations, supply chain, maintenance, making sure that your solution solves the problems of your customer. Because if it does not solve the problem of your customer, it's a problem it's on its own. So implementation and infrastructure is really messy and expensive. Because these are the realities we as entrepreneurs, especially those of us that build out hardware solutions in Nigeria and in Africa, we basically face.
I attest to that, and it is really difficult to build infrastructure in Africa, especially when you have a kind of
Yes.
standard you want to maintain. It is difficult. Practically, most times you have to import or build it yourself, and that is capital intensive. And looking at that, throughout this journey of yours, what nearly broke your conviction? Did you get at a point where you said you have to rethink? Probably you have to just like give up, do something different.
I've given up so many times in my mind. Sometimes I tell myself, why don't I just go get a job and just be done with this? I've had so many situations around that where I have told myself, this is too much work. It's a whole lot of headache. But the drive around it is basically seeing how people make use of our solution, the smiles on people's faces. Most times, it's not really just about the money, the finances that come for it. When you see how people make use of your product, the joy it gives them, knowing fully well that now I can say I have electricity, I can say I have internet, I can talk to someone, I can make enough money because my system has provided this convenience for them to start saving more, pushing it to other businesses. That sort of gives me the joy to basically continue this particular struggle. But there's been a whole lot of time that I've told myself, it's just too much. It's just too much, yeah.
You are a real founder because real founders, the ones mostly not moved by money. You have a problem, you have a challenge you want to solve. And most times you are doing something no one has done before you or very few people have done before you. So you take the big guys from America or from even Germany. I also feel the same pain, the same thing I get asked a lot. Why do you want to build real estate in Africa in an European standard, which means 24/7, electricity? There's a lot of questions I get, and why invest in Africa so much and things like that. So I feel your pain, and I think it is part of the journey, especially when you want to do something at that scope or at that range. But looking at that, because I know that in Africa, it is a very different ball game for someone like you, for even Africans generally, and just because of the narrative about Africa. What do you think that investors still misunderstand about African infrastructure business today?
Infrastructure doesn't work as fast as software in Africa. It doesn't work in the same way. It doesn't have the same volume of finances in terms of payment and installation. There's a whole lot of processes around that. There's a value chain. You have to install, you have to maintain the systems. Those alone are one of the bottlenecks. They have to understand that to provide infrastructure in Africa, you need to take cognizance of all of this. A foundational problem is available, you have to solve the foundational problems first. The second part is they underestimate our willingness to pay, which I said earlier. Currently, we already pay for an infrastructure that doesn't work, a grid that fails consistently. So you should understand basically that once you provide something reliable, they are willing to pay. Africa is a long-term game. When you provide the infrastructure as an impact, you provide impact to the customer, the business. Over a long period of time, you then get value, commercial value for what you've deployed to them. Many investors still evaluate Africa infrastructure business like software companies, but infrastructure requires hardware, logistic installation, maintenance, finance, regulations, and trust. The growth may look slower at the beginning, but once the service is reliable, it becomes deeply embedded in people's lives and businesses. Investors underestimate that African customers already pay for bad infrastructure
I
every
think
day.
investors, founders like me who has an African root, there is interest to see Africa prosper, to see Africa have a different story to tell rather than poverty, disease, help, help, help. But we have to also be realistic that for someone from US, from Germany, from England that have no root, the social aspect doesn't really play much a role. All they are looking for is how fast or how well or how secure can I get back my return. Now, for me, it's not a problem. And I think it is a fair deal. But the reason why I'm asking you this question and also trying to find out a way is for whoever is listening, especially the founders in Accra, in Lagos, that wants to do something and they want to sell the idea to investors so that they can get some money. One thing I've realized, as you explained, is you can sell the social aspect, why they should invest and why it makes sense and why Africa cannot provide return on investment like software or hardware in Europe. Many of the investors will not just buy this story just because of the nature of how investing works. They want their money fast. So what I'm trying to get at this point is, what do you think founders who are operating from Africa, how they can sell their strategy aside the social impact in a different way that it resonates more with investors in Western
For
world?
us, we always try to sell our product as products and services as a package deal. I always tell, don't come with a one-off solution. Don't just come with energy, because when you talk of energy, you only get your returns from energy alone. So we sort of like find a way to get four problems, which we could combine together. At that point in time, when you provide it to the customer, you don't just solve just electricity alone. You don't just solve just internet alone. You don't just solve security alone. No, you solve three problems at once. And what happens then? You get a higher, much faster way of getting money back into your system, back to the investor. Because now you're not just solving one problem, you're solving a plethora of problems and getting commercial value for those problems that you're solving. So if you say you want to sell an idea to an investor, be very, very intentional.
But in general, how has your experience been with foreign investors for more innovations?
We've not had a lot of contact with investors. Basically, we talk to the investor once in a while, but we've seen that they are off to one-off solutions. And we as a business, we as Moon Innovations, we know what we are looking for. We know what the people feel. We are on ground. We feel what they feel. We express what they see everywhere, and we want to solve their problems.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah, we've had great experience with GIZ. We were with GIZ in Germany, in Berlin last year for the GITEX program, if I can remember very well.
And looking at that, how do you build trust?
You build trust by being consistent. Let me take, for instance, where we first of all deployed our solar utility box. When we deployed it, I had a feeling that it was going to fail. It was during our pilot phase. The rest of my team, they were like, oh, we've deployed, yeah. And me understanding how difficult it is to deploy a solution like that, I was waiting for it to fail, quite frankly. And it did. When it did, we went back, we resolved the problem as soon as possible because it's our own idea. We wanted to gain the person's trust. For the fact that we came back, resolved this problem in the nick of time for the customer, we gained his trust much more, that he now markets our product for us.
I hope that a lot of business can take that up from you. But most importantly, for more innovations, I hope you can keep this trajectory moving forward in terms of trying to have very high trust customers. One question I personally get always: what is the uncomfortable truth Africa must accept to compete globally?
It still falls down around infrastructure because you can't provide what you don't have. So if you come to me and you tell me, I want to give you an electricity and I do not have electricity, there's no way I can give you electricity knowing fully well that I myself do not have electricity. For you to resolve something like that, you have to go back to the foundation. Africa currently has a technical fault. For you to solve that, you need technical leaders to bring us out from that position where we are in. Businessmen that understands how to solve technical problems. As I said earlier, it's more like a foundational truth we have to tell ourselves. Let's solve the problem from the foundation. Our leaders need to be technical. Africa has abundance of resources, but very few of these resources are manufactured in the continent itself. It's only a technical leader that will be able to say, no, we have to manufacture this in here. And when he does that, you see the entire dynamics will change.
It's a little bit political, but why I like this conversation and why I decided to do this podcast, like I said earlier on, is I think young Africans need to understand what needs to happen for the change and for the development Africa wants. It's not entertainment, it's not emotional, it has to be structural. I have observed that there is a very big systemic issues. I've done a deep dive on the Nigerian energy sector. I've done a deep dive on Ivory Coast cocoa. Looking at Nigeria, it is quite interesting that a country Nigeria that has a lot of petroleum has no functioning refinery. For whatever reason, it just does not add up. A country that has just so much resources did not see the value in having a working refinery. Instead, they looked for the cheaper, easy solution. And that is the systemic problem I see in Africa, that there is no big vision. Everything is short term. And if you look at countries like Malaysia, Singapore, that have done something meaningful, it takes vision and, like you said, technical understanding. But above all, very important, it takes vision, and you should be able to pay for that vision. So it takes quite some pain to do something like that. But going back to what I've said, so the problem I see most times many Africans, including the leaders, don't understand is that we have to start creating structures. And the lack of structure, the lack of system is the biggest challenge we have in the continent, just because there is so much waste going on that we have accepted as a way of life, and that cannot lead to any meaningful economic transformation. So what kind of African leaders and founders will the next decade require?
We need leaders with the proper vision and the technical foundation to implement proper structures in the African continent. Because without these technical capabilities, these structures cannot be properly implemented. Why do we need technical leaders? As I said earlier, we need technical leaders because currently Africa suffers from a technical problem. And that technical problem has caused infrastructural decay. We need a leader that has a foresight, a vision to last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, with the technical capability to understand what it would take for that to happen. Not just politicizing it, but actually making it happen.
And what value does AI provide for your customers?
We chose to use AI in Moon Innovation on Solar Utility Box. We wanted a way to see how we could solve the problems around maintenance, predictions, helping us make our system much more reliable, since we are trying to solve an infrastructural problem. We embedded artificial intelligence to basically monitor the systems for us, wherever it is. We embedded artificial intelligence to monitor security for us, wherever it's deployed, so it could either detect intruders and whatnot. And in the future, we are applying artificial intelligence to help with healthcare, retail, agriculture, and security as well. We chose this approach because we've solved the infrastructural problem of electricity, internet, and security, which can be plugged into electric vehicles and charging. What comes next? How do we maintain this system? How do we make it provide more value to our customers? Currently, our customers use the system to know when there will be a downtime because of there's not a lot of sun available. They use that to basically manage how long the system could last without electricity, what they need to turn off to basically make the system last longer if they have a smaller system compared to the house they've installed the system in. So that is how we basically use artificial intelligence. We want to be able to use it to solve real problems: electricity, internet, security, healthcare, agriculture. We are looking to start bringing in customers around healthcare for electronic health recording.
In Germany, it will not make sense to have an edge just because if you look at the long-term cost, you have to maintain it, you have to run it yourself. But if you go with cloud, it's quite cheaper. The disadvantage generally is that you don't have power over your data. Whoever runs your cloud infrastructure has much power over your data. But what I'm trying to say with that I understand the fact that the cloud infrastructure right now for Nigerians is expensive just because you have to pay in dollars or whatever, they use the dollar exchange rate. But assuming that Nigeria or Africa has a cloud infrastructure provider that is a local provider, probably the price will be cheaper. You don't have to go on edge. Or do you have any extra advantage aside cost why you decide to go on edge?
One of the advantages we sought with the edge computing was purely around closeness to customers. There have been problems around internet connectivity issues, cost as well. And that's where edge basically plays a lead role, right? It brings artificial intelligence closer to the customers. So in that particular instance, all you need to do is to provide you much more services to you. It's just like your phone, right? Where you have your Microsoft Word closer on your mobile app. That's one of the major advantages of the edge. Yeah. So what we mean by connectivity is internet access. If you notice very well, you can't really find a public Wi-Fi in the Nigerian ecosystem. You can't walk in somewhere and you just see a Wi-Fi. Even in homes, mostly what people make use of is the mobile phone to hotspot and maybe connect to the internet and all of that. Our solar utility box provides internet access from within, either through satellite or through SIM cards. So once you redeploy the system to you, you don't really have to start looking for a third-party system. Once we deploy it to you, you already have internet access within the system itself. Energy also from the system, running in tandem with the system itself. It falls basically around convenience for our customers. But what we like to call it is energy internet. We are able to manage the system remotely. You are able to work conveniently without having to go through 3, 4, 5 applications just to manage electricity, internet, and security. You can easily make payment from a single application. When you pay for electricity, maybe in the US or in Europe, you could pay for electricity and internet together. But it's not possible here. Why? Because the electricity is not very available. Right. But the solar utility box helps you to solve that in a nutshell. Electricity, internet, and security in one single deployment. You get energy, you get connectivity, and you are secured all at once.
Just one more question before we run it up. If everything goes right, what has Moon Innovation actually changed? Not for investors, not for headlines, but for a specific family in Lagos, in Accra, in Abidjan.
They wake up with electricity, internet access, security, and ability to work, study, trade, access healthcare, and grow their income without being limited by infrastructure failures. Whether it is one person home or a shop, a farm, a clinic, or a community, we want modern infrastructure to become dependable and accessible.
We build, we break,
Continent DNA.